Tell you what, the energy levels here in Downing Street are rising by the moment as we wait for Boris Johnson to appear from the front door for the last time and to give his speech. We can see that his friends and family are gathering, some of them coming out of number 11 and waiting on the steps of number 11 Downing Street. A little bit further down the road there, just beyond the podium, you can see some of his Conservative backbenchers who are gathering. And there's Rachel Johnson, the Prime Minister's sister, again with Nadine Dorries in the trainers, the Culture Secretary, taking their places down there in that group. A lot of people here. For them, a lot of them, of course, for those really close to Boris Johnson, his family, his friends, the people who've been with him throughout this, it's a sad day. We know how loyal and what a close friend Nadine Dorries is. So for them, they'll be sorry to see him go. They regret what has happened. But the Conservative Party at the same time resetting under Liz Truss, and we know there was a majority of MPs in the end who wanted to get rid of him. So how is he going to use this moment? How is he going to use his final speech here in the next few moments at that podium? How does he make use of this to try and determine how we all remember him and his 3 years inside that famous house? And what clues might he give us about how he faces the future, about his own plans, how he will behave as an ex-Prime Minister? We've been talking this morning about how troublesome former PMs can be to new incumbents. What's he planning to do? How's he planning to behave? Will he be the jokey Boris Johnson, the boosterish Boris Johnson that we sometimes see? Or will he play it straight? And will this be a more formal farewell? We'll find out in the next few minutes. I've never seen so many MPs with cameras and phones at the ready, getting their selfies to take that picture of the last moment they were there with Boris Johnson. Nick Eardley, our chief political correspondent, is with us. Some of them do look quite emotional there, Nick, hugging, kissing and looking, very sorry.
Well, look, a lot of the politicians that you can see on screen just now have been prominent supporters of Boris Johnson for some time. Their political careers have been linked to the rise of Boris Johnson. People like Nadine Dorries, who wanted him to be Prime Minister for some time. Her cabinet career is over now. She's going to resign as soon as Boris Johnson does. So yes, for a lot of these politicians, this is an emotional moment. They don't think it needed to happen. They're angry that their party brought the Prime Minister down. But fundamentally, Boris Johnson is now out of power. He will be out of office in a few minutes' time. I think in the next few minutes, what we'll hear from him is, yes, a bit of a valedictory, talking about what he did in power, what he thinks his achievements are, but also a bit of a plea for unity with his party. You know, we know that the country is facing economic turbulence, some really tough times. We know that over the next few weeks and months, the cost of living is going to be the dominating issue. And I think you'll hear from Boris Johnson a bit of a pledge to, or a bit of a plea, I should say, for his party to reunite, to get behind his successor, Liz Truss, and to allow her to get on with the business of governing. You know, for the last few months on Breakfast, in fact, do you know what? For the last few years on Breakfast, we've been covering almost every week the turbulence in the Conservative Party. I don't think that's over by any stretch of the imagination. But I think you'll hear Boris Johnson make a plea to his MPs to allow the new Prime Minister to get on with the job and to deal with the economic crisis.
It's almost as interesting looking at these pictures of who's here as who's not here. It's hard to assess when we're looking at the crowds, but I'm trying to work out if there are any, is Michael Gove? Does Michael Gove come up and say farewell today?
I suspect
some
we won't see
interesting
Michael
personal
Gove.
relationships here.
We won't see Michael Gove today would be my bet. I'm not sure if he'll have been invited. The relationship there has not recovered since he was sacked on one of Boris Johnson's last moves before he announced his plan to resign. But there are several cabinet ministers down there. I can see Jacob Rees-Mogg, I can see the Scottish Secretary, Alistair Jack, the Leader of the Commons, Mark Spencer, Defence Secretary Ben Wallace. You know, a lot of people who have had their political... Shailesh Vara, you can see on his phone there. He's the Northern Ireland Secretary who's not been in post for long. Don't think he'll be in post by the end of the week.
Making most of this moment, getting his pictures.
He's getting his video in while he can. But yes, you've got, a lot of the cabinet there, a lot of people who are sad to see Boris Johnson go. It's interesting actually talking to Tory MPs over the last few weeks, over the summer. There was a bit of a sense, I think, of buyer's remorse that some were quite regretful that Mr. Johnson had been brought down. And, some hoping maybe that we've not seen the last of him. But his message, I think, in the next few minutes is going to be about, yes, what he's done in power, yes, what he considers his achievements to be, but also what needs to happen now. And the country facing inflation going up, facing these high energy bills, facing the prospect of a pretty serious recession. It's a serious moment for the country, and I think the Prime Minister will probably want to reflect that as he leaves number 10 for the last time.
You're watching these pictures and wondering where the Prime Minister-elect Liz Truss is. She's not here. I suppose we wouldn't expect her to be here. She doesn't want to be the focus of attention today, but I wonder what she will be thinking watching this, because she's not going to have much time to enjoy her arrival, is she? She's going to be straight up there into her office and dealing with, we've talked about this groaning in trade, just the biggest issues.
I remember standing here just over 3 years ago when Boris Johnson became Prime Minister and saying what a daunting in trade he has, trying to get a new Brexit deal and then force it through Parliament. He had a few weeks, and ultimately it proved a few months to do that. Liz Truss has a couple of days before she needs to sell her vision to the country of how she's going to help with the cost of living. We'll start to see some of that this afternoon. She'll want to give us her big pitch for power. But in terms of the specifics, we'll probably see them on Thursday. And that is not long to finish off a plan that is going to have to help millions of people and thousands of businesses through what is going to be a really turbulent winter. I think it's going to be a big plan. I think it's going to involve a lot of money. I think it's going to involve some sort of energy price freeze, the current cap being kept in place in some form or another. But that's going to have to happen immediately. She really has to get the ground running. So when we see her this afternoon, that vision she sets out as the new Prime Minister is a really big moment for her, and she won't have long to get going.
And we've heard from voters in Lee in Greater Manchester talking to us this morning, a Tory win seat at the last election, but saying to Nina, I don't really care who is Prime Minister, I just want to know what they're going to do to help me. What are they going to do for my bills? How are they going to bring down inflation? That's the only thing that matters to me right now. So all of this is kind of interesting telly. It's a moment in history, but there are more pressing matters, aren't there, for real lives?
I think that's absolutely right, and I suspect a lot of people watching at home will be thinking the exact same thing. And that is where the attention will turn this afternoon. There is no doubt that the one thing Liz Truss will be pressed on time and time again over the next few weeks and months is the economy and the cost of living crisis. And as I say, I think we'll hear a bit of that from Boris Johnson, actually. The impression I get, speaking to people around him over the last few days, is the severity of the crisis is well understood in number 10, even by the outgoing administration. So I wouldn't be surprised if he talks a bit about that. But look, Westminster is a place that moves really quickly. And what we hear over the next few minutes will really matter in terms of how Boris Johnson's remembered, his own vision of what he delivered in power over the last 3 years. But ultimately, what matters today is what we hear this afternoon from the new Prime Minister and what we hear from her over the next few days about how she's going to tackle the cost of living crisis.
2 minutes, we're told. 2 minutes. There's Grant Shapps, Transport Secretary. Who else have we got?
Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack in there, Jacob Rees-Mogg.
And his son, that's Jacob
Rees-Mogg's
Rees-Mogg's son.
children,
He's brought his child here to enjoy this moment. And we understand that Jacob Rees-Mogg will be back in a Liz Truss cabinet, we're assuming.
The latest I've heard is there's a good chance he will be the business secretary. He's been involved in a lot of those meetings over the last few days with energy companies, talking about the big plan that Ms Truss has to freeze prices, talking about how that's going to work in practice. So there are a few faces in that crowd that are likely to still be in cabinet by the end of today, by tomorrow as well. Alistair Jack, for example, good chance of staying the Scottish Secretary, maybe a job for Grant Shapps. I think that's still being worked out this afternoon. But yeah, look, people who have been key parts of Boris Johnson's administration, key parts of his political career, his political rise. And in the next few seconds, we're now going to hear from Boris Johnson about his vision of, or his valedictory of what he's done over the last few years, a plea for unity in his party and for a chance for the new Prime Minister to get on with what is a daunting job.
Yes, suddenly it's got a bit quieter here. There's a bit of a hush outside that famous black door. And everybody's assuming that Prime Minister Boris Johnson is about to walk out of the front door, come up to the podium and give that valedictory address, that speech where he sums up what he says he's achieved and gives us a sense of how he hopes to be remembered. It's interesting, Nick, looking at the Conservative Party representatives who are here from different parts of the party, divided on Brexit, divided on what to do about the economy and the cost of living. How Liz Truss holds this party together going forward, because whatever she does, and if this energy plan is as big as is being mooted, there are a lot of people probably in this street right now who don't like it.
Well, look, if it is universal, which is what we're expecting.
Well, so everyone gets the help. Yeah.
Everybody gets the help. In fact, here's the black door opening.
Door opens.
Here's Boris Johnson and his wife, Carrie.
Thank you. Well, this is it, folks. Thank you, everybody, for coming out so early this morning. In only a couple of hours, I will be in Balmoral to see Her Majesty the Queen. And the torch will finally be passed to a new Conservative leader. The baton will be handed over in what has unexpectedly turned out to be a relay race. They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now. And through that lacquered black door, a new Prime Minister will shortly go to meet a fantastic group of public servants. The people who got Brexit done. The people who delivered the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, and never forget, 70% of the entire population got a dose within 6 months, faster than any comparable country. That is government for you. That's this Conservative government. People who organised those prompt early supplies of weapons to the heroic Ukrainian armed forces, an action that may very well have helped change the course of the biggest European war for 80 years. And because of the speed and urgency of what you did, everybody involved in this government, to get this economy moving again from July last year, in spite of all the opposition, all the naysayers, we have and will continue to have that economic strength to give people the cash they need to get through this energy crisis that has been caused by Putin's vicious war. And I know that Liz Truss and this compassionate Conservative government will do everything we can to get people through this crisis, and this country will endure it, and we will win. And if Putin thinks that he can succeed by blackmailing or bullying the British people, then he is utterly deluded. And the reason we will have those funds now and in the future is because we Conservatives understand the vital symmetry between government action and free market, capitalist, private sector enterprise. We're delivering on those huge manifesto commitments, making streets safer, neighbourhood crime down 38% in the last 3 years, 13,790 more police on the streets, building more hospitals, and yes, we will have 50,000 more nurses by the end of the decade, and 40 more hospitals by the end of 50,000 nurses by the end of this Parliament, I should say. 40 new hospitals by the end of the decade. Putting record funding into our schools and into teachers' pay, giving everybody over 18 a lifetime skills guarantee so they can keep upskilling throughout their lives. 3 new high-speed rail lines, 3, including Northern Powerhouse Rail, colossal road programs from the Pennines to Cornwall, the rollout of gigabit broadband up over the last 3 years, I am proud to say, since you were kind enough to elect me, from 7% of our country's premises having gigabit broadband to 70% today. And we are, of course, providing the short and the long-term solutions for our energy needs, and not just using more of our own domestic hydrocarbons, but going up by 2030 to 50 gigawatts of wind power. That is half this country's electricity needs from offshore wind alone. A new nuclear reactor every year. And looking at what is happening in this country, the changes that are taking place, that is why private sector investment is flooding in. More private sector, more venture capital investment than China itself. More billion-pound tech companies sprouting here in the UK than in France, Germany and Israel combined. And as a result, unemployment, as I leave office, unemployment down to lows not seen since I was about 10 years old and bouncing around on a space hopper, my friends. And on the subject of bouncing around in future careers, let me say that I am now like one of those booster rockets that has fulfilled its function, and I will now be gently re-entering the atmosphere and splashing down invisibly in some remote and obscure corner of the Pacific. And like Cincinnatus, I am returning to my plough. And I will be offering this government nothing but the most fervent support. This is, I'll tell you why, this is a tough time for the economy. This is a tough time for families up and down the country. We can and we will get through it and we will come out stronger the other side. But I say to my fellow Conservatives, it's time for politics to be over, folks. It's time for us all to get behind Liz Truss and her team and her programme and deliver for the people of this country. Because that is what the people of this country want, that's what they need, and that's what they deserve. I'm proud to have discharged the promises I made to my party when you were kind enough to choose me. Winning the biggest majority since 1987, the biggest share of the vote since 1979. Delivering Brexit, delivering our manifesto commitments, including, by the way, including social care, reforming social care, helping people up and down the country, ensuring that Britain is once again standing tall in the world. Speaking with clarity and authority from Ukraine to the AUKUS pact with America and Australia. Because we are one whole and entire united kingdom whose diplomats, security services and armed forces are so globally admired. And by the way, as I leave, I believe our union is so strong that those who want to break it up, they'll keep trying, but they will never, ever succeed. Thank you to everybody behind me in this building. Thank you to all of you in government. Thank you to everybody who's helped look after me and my family over the last 3 years, including Dylan, the dog. And I just say to my party, if Dylan and Larry can put behind them their occasional difficulties, then so can the Conservative Party. Above all, thanks to you, the British people, to the voters for giving me the chance to serve. All of you who worked so tirelessly together to beat COVID, to put us where we are today. Together, we have laid foundations that will stand the test of time, whether by taking back control of our laws or putting in vital new infrastructure. Great, solid masonry on which we will continue to build together, paving the path of prosperity now and for future generations. And I will be supporting Liz Truss and the new government every step of the way. Thank you all very much. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you.
So Boris Johnson takes his wife Carrie's hand, says goodbye to friends, Conservative colleagues and family. One last handshake for Jacob Rees-Mogg and his son before Prime Minister Boris Johnson leaves Downing Street for the last time. And it did sound, from what he said, that he does see this as the last time. He was pledging loyalty to the Liz Truss government. He was talking about the Conservative Party putting differences behind it, moving on, sticking together. There was no hint or suggestion about trying to interject from the back benches. He said he would back her fully. One last round of applause from the crowd here as he disappears from Downing Street into the autumn sun on Whitehall. And it was interesting for someone who's talked throughout his premiership, throughout his political career about positivity and boosterism and sunshine, just at the moment as he came out and stood at that podium, the sun filled Downing Street. It's almost like he knew what time that was going to happen. So the cavalcade leaves here. Prime Minister Boris Johnson will no longer be Prime Minister in a few hours' time. And Nick Eardley is with us to reflect on that. Nick, I mean, it was classic Boris Johnson, wasn't it?
Yeah, look, I mean, he clearly wanted to try and defend his record and say, maybe not had as long as I wanted in power, but here's the things that I've done that I'm proud of. You know, all that mention of Brexit, of the COVID vaccine, of Ukraine. Gigabit broadband was something he wanted to talk a lot about. But look, I think there are three really important things to take away from that speech. Firstly, Boris Johnson made it pretty clear that he's still a bit bitter about the way that he was disposed, talking about his party changing the rules halfway through. It was only
turned out to be a relay race.
Exactly,
yeah.
Passing the baton on. You know, it was only the briefest of mentions, but clearly not totally happy still about what happened. He gave a pretty clear indication that, for now anyway, he's got no intention of a political comeback in this place. He talked about being the booster rocket that had fulfilled its function, now returning to his plough. I mean, look, John, let's be political realists here. Do we really think we've seen the last of Boris Johnson? I'm going to say maybe not, but he's trying to play down the idea that he's got unfinished business here. And then finally and thirdly, that idea that his party now needs to reunite. You know, we know that the Conservative Party's been fractured for some time. I suspect the idea of it reuniting is probably going to be a pretty tough task over the next few months. But there's that comparison between two of those animals that we love to see pictures of, Dylan, his dog, and Larry, the Downing Street cat, who is staying. Dylan goes, Larry stays, but he said if they get on, the Conservative Party can. The hope, I think, will be that he's left on a high where he's saying to his party, let's move on from this, let's get behind the Prime Minister and let her deal with the cost of living crisis.
And that memorable quote from him, I'm like one of those booster rockets that has now fulfilled its purpose. I'm going to splash down in an obscure remote part of the Pacific, almost like he's just going to disappear from view now. You're sceptical, everyone's sceptical.
Look, I mean, if there's anything you can say about Boris Johnson, he often has something to say. He enjoys the limelight. You know, he's clearly still got a bit of bounce about him politically. I don't think we're going to see anything of him imminently. He's trying to tell us all that he's not wanting us all to continually talk about a political comeback from him. But look, would you bet your mortgage on never hearing from Boris Johnson in a prominent role again? I wouldn't.
And rumour has it that he's looking for a column in a newspaper again, and that would be a way of him communicating what he thought. Even if he's not doing television interviews and sit-down chats every 5 minutes on air, he could still have an awful lot of influence within the Conservative Party.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's still a big part of the Conservative Party which likes Boris Johnson. There's still a lot of ministers who are really sad at the way that things have panned out and the fact that he's now left Downing Street probably for good. I mean, look, I do think the Conservative Party does want to move on now. It does want to see what Liz Truss has when she comes here this afternoon, look at her vision, give her the benefit of the doubt. Boris Johnson has clearly been damaged considerably by what happened over the last few months. There's a reason he's leaving Downing Street, and that's that incredible day or two when we stood here and there was just a raft of resignations from government which made it impossible for him to govern. We've seen him say, here's the things I'm proud of. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes quiet for a few weeks, perhaps.
I think say a few hours.
A few weeks, perhaps a few months. But look, have we seen the last of Boris Johnson giving his views on different issues of state? Don't think so.
Nick, we'll talk again very soon. It's interesting to say the Conservative Party wanting to move on. They have literally moved on. Everybody's left within a couple of minutes. Boris Johnson and Carrie were whisked off into Whitehall. They're now flying up to Balmoral, where they will say goodbye to the Queen. That is where Liz Truss will be formally asked by the Queen to form a government before she flies back here later this